real authority in the south where she can keep her eye on things. And this is a tradition that continues after Sargon. Later kings in Mesopotamia will take their daughters and establish them as the high priestess of Nana at Ur. This is a disc from Enhedu Anna, which was found in the temple precinct of Ur. So we have texts that talk about this establishment, and we have objects that relate to her. So we know she was there. It's carved from alabaster, and it's a very rare image for a number of reasons. For one, we've got Enhedu Anna herself, who's in the center here, and she's associated with this priest who's pouring probably a libation onto what might have been a sprouting plant. We've seen that iconography elsewhere as well. You can see here the disc itself is really badly damaged, so this is a reconstruction that probably, it's a pretty bad reconstruction. This ziggurat-looking thing, chances are it was probably a platform, and there was an image of a god on top of it. But this was actually reconstructed by Woolley, and it's not such a great image. But we do know that it did come from Enhedu Anna, and Enhedu Anna is very interesting for a number of reasons. She's actually credited as being one of, if not the first known author of literature in all of history. We've seen texts, proclamations by kings who are known, but we've actually seen wisdom texts and mythology, but the authors who write them, we don't know who they are. In this case, Enhedu Anna, we know who she is because she speaks in the first person, and we have texts that come from Ur during this period. So that's really quite something. She's said to have been a teacher, a leader, and a very important official, a poet and a priestess. And I'll read you some of the texts that we have, this very early literature, again, the first author in all of history. And the fact is, right, again, it's wonderful, she's a woman. So, we don't get to see many women, especially of high stature, in history at this early period. So I'll read you some of her poetry. Queen of the May, too numerous to count, rising forth as a resplendent light, woman most driven, clothed in frightening radiance, loved by An and Uras, An's beloved, you are above all the great. You who love the crown, who's suited for the priesthood, empowered with all of its 7 May. My queen, you are the guardian of the great May. You have uplifted them. You've held the May in your hand. You've gathered them and clasped them to your breast. Like a dragon, you cast venom upon the enemy land. In the regions where you thundered like Iskar, in Elam, it no longer exists because of you. The flooding waters surge down upon the enemy land, and you are the supreme one in heaven and earth. You are there in Nana. And it's wonderful. We have this complete text. It's only a section of it. And Enhedu Anna goes on to actually speak in the first person and talk about some of the difficulties she's having in the region. So it's quite interesting that we have this early author, that she's a woman. This is 1,700 years before Sappho, right? And people will tell you that Sappho is the first female poet in history, right? Not the case. Enhedu Anna is, and what's more, probably the first known author in all of history that we have coming from Ur. I will continue. Here's a genealogy of Sargon. Again, this Akkadian empire is short-lived, only 200 years and 3 successions. But here's Enhedu Anna, the daughter of Sargon. Sargon is said to have married probably a number of women, but Enhedu Anna's mother was probably Sumerian. Again, linking those ties and creating those political alliances that allowed such a large empire to exist. We have Sargon, after his reign sort of starts to come to an end at the end of 56 years, the entire area falls into revolt. And it's up to his son, Rimush, to take over. He reigns for 9 years before he's assassinated in a palace plot. And his brother, Manish-Tushu, here's his full name. This is a short and abbreviated version, reigned for 15 years after that. We have some documents from or some other objects from this period that we should take a look at. This is a standing statue of Manishtushu, the son of Sargon. It's 35 inches high, and it's in the same pose as these earlier Sumerian dedicatory statues, with the hands folded in front of the chest. Again, right, the Akkadians using this very known Sumerian style. But you can see the difference here, the shift towards realism that characterizes the Akkadian period. This interest in reproducing the physical and material world. Look at the skirt, for example, right? The folds in it. The material is actually carved. And again, this is in diorite, this very, very hard stone. So there's a tactile quality. They're taking this hard stone and making it look supple with the ripples of the skirt flowing across the front. Again, making this image very personable, very realistic. This is a human king. And again, we've seen this shift from the king as a secular leader and not a divinity in himself. We can compare it to another standing statue, also from the reign of Manishtushu. And you can see at the bottom here we have the scenes of defeated enemies which ring the base of the statue itself. And it's probable because of this that these aren't votive statues at all. These weren't set up in temples. Well, they might have been in temples, but their purpose was probably to celebrate victories and proclaim the power of the king. So probably victory statues rather than votive statues. The final object we'll look at today is really quite remarkable. This is a copper head of an Akkadian ruler. And you'll see this in Frankfurt and a number of texts as being said that this is the portrait of Sargon himself. Chances are it probably comes a little bit later. It's probably his grandson, Naram Sin. But again, we're not quite sure. This comes from a very different context. This was found in a hoard at Nineveh, dating to a much later period. But we can see here just the fine degree of detail that goes into this metalworking. It is mutilated. It was mutilated at a later date. Obviously, it wasn't used in this context. You can see here that it's been ritually destroyed. The eyes have been gouged out. And that could also be for a number of other reasons, right? This statue probably had precious gems, precious stones inlaid in the eyes that somebody might have wanted to get a hold of. But it's more than that. You can see the nose has been, there's been an attempt to hack the nose off. It's smashed flat. It's been thrown down on some hard surface. The ears have been cut off. So this statue was ritually destroyed, and we'll look at the end of the Akkadian period and sort of see how and why this might be the case, especially during the reign of Naram Sin. But for now, just pay close attention to, the interest in portraying the physicality of these subjects, these humans. It's just a phenomenal piece cast in copper using the lost wax technique. And I think we have time. I'm going to show a really brief film at the end just about the lost wax technique, so you get a sense of how metalworking took place during this period. It's very complicated and very, very interesting. And you can see, of course, again, right, our portrayal of an Akkadian king using Sumerian norms. This Akkadian king, whether it's Sargon or Naram Sin, with the traditional head bun that we saw elsewhere, we just talked about. In cylinder seals, we even see on a small scale this interest in portraying the physical nature of beings. These individuals have weight, they have volume. You can see the musculature, the attention to musculature on these nude belted heroes. Same nude belted heroes we saw elsewhere, but now portrayed in a very realistic sense. This is a seal from Shar-Kali-Shari, the scribe of Shar-Kali-Shari, and it's carved on diorite as well, this one here. And in this case, we have a shift back to these sort of frozen monumental figures, but now the text, instead of just sort of being thrown in there, is actually part of the composition itself. They're using negative space strategically to highlight what's taking place in these small narratives. And here, right, we have an inscription that sits on the back of these water buffalo. Actually, water buffalo, right, coming from the Indus Valley. So again, connections on the far periphery of the Akkadian Empire. We also have the use of these contestant pairs. The focus being less on what is being depicted, but how, again, it's being depicted. Our nude belted hero, in this case, battling with a lion. He's got this lion by the tail. And, right, cylinder seals repeat themselves over and over and over again, but if you look closely, these images are actually different. It's the same image, but it's been carved twice on the cylinder seal. So this emphasis on symmetry, on focus in cylinder seals, and again, that attention to musculature and detail. So let's take a quick look. I just wanted to show you guys, since it's Friday again, this, again, a kind of weird video, but this is about lost wax casting. Forgive the music. And this is how, again, this copper head of this Akkadian king would have been made, in addition to other objects too, all the other bronze objects.
Much of what we know about the culture of ancient civilizations is through depictions that survive in their bronze sculpture. These sculptures were created with the lost wax process thousands of years ago. The lost wax process is more sophisticated today, but it essentially remains the same as it was in 2000 BC. Most modern sculptors work with a fine arts foundry and its staff of experts to have their pieces cast in bronze. Once the artist completes the original sculpture, which is usually modeled in clay, plaster, or wax, the original piece must be molded. The mold consists of two basic parts, an inner layer usually of a flexible silicone rubber, supported by a rigid protective mother mold of plaster or fiberglass. The mold is engineered to separate in two or more parts, thus releasing the original artwork. When the mold is rejoined after the original artwork has been removed, an exact negative image of the original exists. The next step is to pour wax into this mold to create the positive wax replica of the original artwork. This petroleum-based wax is melted at about 210 degrees. It is poured into the mold, rotated so all surfaces are covered, and the excess is poured out. Pours are repeated to achieve a thickness of about 3/16 inch in wax. When cooled, the mold is opened and a wax replica is removed. Wax chasing is the next stage of the process. This delicate process consists of removing seam lines created where the mold separates, repairing imperfections such as air bubbles, and reattaching any parts that had to be cut off during the molding process. This is done with heated soldering irons and special tools. The completed wax must look exactly like the artist's original sculpture. At this point, the wax is ready to be sprued. Wax bars or channels are attached to the piece to create pathways through which the molten bronze will travel to the artwork. Wax vents and gates are also attached to the wax sculpture